Welcome back, Defenders. Jake here. Russia's three-day presidential election has concluded. Let's check in and see what the results are. Putin wins with 87% of the votes. That's incredible. This man is dominant in Russian politics. What's the secret? What's his secret to his longevity and success? All of Putin's opposition are either dead, jailed, or exiled. Putin has proven to dictators all over the world, if you want to win an election, all you have to do is murder or imprison anyone who disagrees with you. It's a pretty effective strategy. And for fun, let's recap the candidates kept off the ballot in this year's Russian presidential election. There was Yekaterina Dontsova, officially kept off the ballot for spelling errors on her application. Boris Netizin, he was kept off the ballot. The Kremlin said there were too many invalid signatures on his application. Navalny couldn't run for president because he was sent to an Arctic gulag and then was murdered. Lots of other Russian politicians that Putin has eliminated over the last 24 years. They're all in prison or dead now. They also couldn't run against Putin. And even Russia's hardline nationalists couldn't get a candidate on the ballot. This is Strelkov, Igor Girkin. He wanted to run from prison. And of course, Putin wasn't going to let someone more pro-war than him be on the ballots. So your choices were either Putin or three people who definitely voted for Putin, support Putin, and don't oppose any of Putin's policies. That's how you get 87% of the votes. Now, really, probably a majority of Russians do genuinely support Putin, given that freedom of speech and freedom of the press no longer exists in Russia. This is how you control a population. You control what language they use, what thoughts they have, and eventually you come to embrace Big Brother. So who's dumb enough to congratulate Putin on his election win? And it's dictators from across the world: Venezuela, Nicaragua, North Korea, China, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Honduras, Cuba, and the Pope. And for fun, I want to show you guys Putin's election results going back to 2000s, because I do think Russia more or less was a democracy in the 90s, and when Putin took power in 2000, it was a real competitive election. Putin got 53% of the votes. If we fast forward to 2004, Putin got 71% of the vote. And this is probably genuine. The 90s in Russia were so chaotic that stability finally was achieved under Putin's first term. So Putin was popular in the 2000s, back when Russians had freedom of speech, independent media, free press. But things took a turn for the worst in 2008 when Putin decided he didn't really want to leave office. The Russian constitution had term limits, and he and Dmitry Medvedev decided to switch places. I think Putin became the prime minister. Medvedev was the prime minister. He became president. Powers were even shifted between the two. Medvedev agreed to only serve one term, so Putin could come back. Did Medvedev get 71% of the votes? And this is when I think Russia began assaulting their own democracy. We fast forward to the 2012 election. Putin returns, 64% of the votes. This is when opposition Russians started fleeing Russia. This is when the crackdown began. Fast forward to 2018, this was not a free and fair election. Putin only gave himself 77% of the votes. So fast forward today to 87%, and for a dictator, these are honestly rookie numbers. Did you know they had elections in the Soviet Union? Nobody ever talked about them because, like Russia today, They're not real elections. But in 1937, Joseph Stalin got 99.3% of the votes. 89 million proud communist Soviets supported the great leader. Fast forward to 1946, Joseph Stalin got 99.19% of the votes, so it actually went down. Little dicey for Stalin, dropping by 0.2%. Fast forward to the 1950 Soviet election, and Stalin gets 99.7% of the votes. Incredible. Way up from the last election. And we can once again talk about modern times with dictatorships. North Korea has elections, and surprise, surprise, Kim Jong-un got 100% of the votes. Absolutely nobody voted against the dear leader, Kim Jong-un. So, Putin's going to put in the time, he's going to put in the efforts. He's up for re-election in 2030, and he wants those triple digits. He thinks he can do it. But the reality is, the modern state of Russia is falling apart. This was supposed to be a special, limited 3-day operation. The government in Kyiv was supposed to flee. The Russian military was supposed to be welcomed as liberators. This is the war that Putin was sold. And here we are 2 years later, and Putin doesn't even control the Donbass region yet. So Ukrainians in the occupied regions were forced to vote at gunpoint. The Ukrainian citizens of Kherson, Zaporizhia, Luhansk, and Donetsk. There's actually a pretty disturbing video. I'll link this down below. But this is a Ukrainian resident of the city of Melitopol. And how voting worked in the occupied territories is 2 men with big guns will come to your door and tell you it's time to vote. And there is an incorrect answer when you vote. So this man actually had the courage to tell these soldiers to go away, that he was refusing to participate. He deliberately did not want to vote. This video went viral. I don't know if this man, his identity is concealed, but they might be able to figure out who he is, and he's definitely in trouble if he's identified. But this is the election that everyone's going to remember. This clip, in a nutshell, summarizes Putin's 2024 presidential election.
Ну что? Посмотри, что происходит. И так целый день. Смотри. Смотри.
A masked Russian soldier with an automatic weapon pulling open the privacy curtains to make sure that voters are voting for Putin. There's another video of a man who said he wasn't going to vote for Putin, and these soldiers tackled him and arrested him. So in 10 years, in 20 years, this is the cartoon, this is the illustration, this is what people are going to remember. Soldiers with guns looking over your shoulder while you vote in a room containing Putin's picture. A lot of these polling locations were in government buildings. Every government building in Russia has the dear leader, Big Brother, watching over you. It is what it is. But crowds can't be rigged. Thousands of Russians in Serbia protest Putin's re-election. The only way that we can somehow register that there was opposition to Putin, because it was all eradicated inside of Russia. At Russian embassies around the world, you as a Russian citizen living abroad were eligible to show up at the embassies to vote. So what Western journalists have been doing is doing exit polling of Russians leaving the embassy after voting, just being asked the simple question, who did you vote for? And in Prague, they were able to do an exit poll of 1,300 Russians who had voted, and only 4% voted for Putin. 66% voted for Davinkov, 24% intentionally left the ballot blank, but still submitted it. It was a protest vote. We've got results from all these embassies around the world. The highest Putin did in a foreign embassy was Greece. This was Athens. Putin in the exit poll got 59% of the votes. The lowest for Putin was in Helsinki with 9%. Obviously, Russians who live abroad have access to different information and have different opinions. I do believe that, once again, Putin has a majority support because there's no ability inside of Russia to think differently. We are many Russian exiles in Lithuania joined the global noon against Putin protest. So for the opposition forces living abroad, they were telling their supporters, line up at the polls at noon on the third day. This is how we can visibly show people we're protesting against Putin's rigged election. It's a good idea, but the problem is that Russian state media filmed these long lines of Russians living abroad trying to vote, and they just said all these people, look at these long lines. Everyone wants to vote in the election because they support Putin. So, good idea, but I don't think it landed. Putin's now re-elected for another 6 years. He eventually will die in office. He's never going to willingly leave the Kremlin. And when it comes to this year, we're going to see the real Putin. A Putin who has 6 years of runway now. Putin who doesn't have to hold back, fearing a general election. We're going to see mobilization. We're going to see crackdowns. We're going to see further repression in Russian society. But here's the chart. This is going to be the most fascinating metric to watch over the coming year. This is the conversion rate between $1 and the Russian ruble. And it hits 100 rubles to $1 last August. Putin was freaking out because this makes his economy and his currency look bad. So he ordered his central bank to use foreign reserves of euros, dollars, and yuan to buy his own currency to stabilize it. This is how Putin, for the last 8 months, has kept the Russian ruble under 100 rubles to $1. But Russia's central bank can't do this forever. They're basically lighting their money on fire by buying Russian rubles because nobody wants Russian rubles. Putin's not going to do this anymore. He knows he can't waste his money this way. So we're going to see what the true value of the ruble is. It's not traded internationally much to begin with these days, but we're going to see the true effects of hyperinflation now that we're past the election and Putin's not going to hand out free money to the people of Russia anymore. And this is also going to hurt Russia's currency. Russia's Krasnodar Krai oil refinery set on fire following another nighttime drone attack by Ukraine. Drone swarm attacks another Russian oil refinery in Slavyansk on Kuba. 12 Russian oil refineries reportedly hit in recent attacks by Ukraine. There's videos online. Once again, I'll link them down below if you want to see oil refineries across Russia blowing up. I think I got 3 different videos for you guys today. But this is incredible. This is a strategy that I do think is going to work. We're going to need another 6 months to a year for this to play out to see the full effects. But Ukraine is really now targeting these refineries. And earlier they did hit oil depots, but I think somebody explained to them that oil depots are not really good targets. A container for oil isn't very expensive. The oil inside isn't very expensive. But these refineries have Western equipment in them that cost millions of dollars. Equipment that they can't legally purchase to replace. And they don't have the Western technicians to come to Russia to help them with repairs. So Ukraine is focusing specifically on these refineries, going after the high dollar value equipment in them to eventually halt all refining capacity. Russia has already stopped exporting gasoline because prices in Russia are already surging. But what's going to happen to Russia? By next winter, if all these refineries are offline, they're no longer a net exporter of petroleum products, and ordinary Russians can't get gas at the pumps. We're going to find out together in 7 months. And I'm sorry, I didn't know we were playing. For those of you at home playing Black Sea Fleet Bingo, there's also now Russian oil refinery bingo. So every day, every other day, we're going to get another oil refinery that has been struck. If you want to create your bingo board at home, let me know when you get bingo. This is also a weird story I've not mentioned, but the Russian oil company Lukoil has been plagued by a series of deaths of its top management since Russia's full-scale invasion last year. So the chairman died from falling out a window. The CEO died from falling out a window. One of their top executives died while performing a ritualistic act by consuming toad poison to treat his alcohol addiction. This is real. And then their vice president recently died, but the cause of death wasn't given, but it might have been gravity. Here's a bizarre story. Drone reportedly hits military base in Russian-controlled Transnistria. So Transnistria is this sliver region that should be part of Moldova. About 2,000 Russian soldiers are stationed here. And to the best of my knowledge, they've been trapped there for the entirety of this war. Given that Transnistria is landlocked and nobody is flying in or out, the people of Transnistria, having supported Russia the last 30 years, their leadership knows they're in trouble if Russia loses this war. So there's been these rumblings and this noise that Transnistria wants to hold a referendum and be formally annexed by Russia. I don't think anyone in the international community would recognize this, but the theory is this helicopter that was blown up, this was a false flag attack by the Russians in Transnistria. The reason why people think it's a false flag, one, Ukraine is not claiming responsibility, but this helicopter that was blown up had been sitting there for a decade. It was decommissioned, rusted. You can see one of the windows is broken. So this was probably not a legitimate attack, but the Russians wanted to claim, we're under attack from either Moldova or Ukraine. We need Russia to annex us today. That's the working theory. This was pretty lazy. I honestly don't think anything will come of this. But this is a big story. GPS jamming of the UK Defense Secretary's jet highlights Russia's regional electronic warfare activities. The UK Defense Secretary was flying home from Poland and close to Russia's Kaliningrad enclave when this incident occurred. So this right here is Kaliningrad. This is Russian-controlled territory. And all of this noise is electronic warfare jamming signals spread out across Poland, Germany, Denmark, and Sweden. What was Russia trying to achieve by doing this? But I think they're just testing stuff. They're just trying to mess with the European Union. 873 commercial planes, these are civilian planes, had their navigation equipment malfunction because of this electronic warfare attack out of Kaliningrad. In my opinion, when Russia loses this war, Kaliningrad has to go. It needs to be given its own independence or absorbed by Lithuania or Poland or Belarus or something, but Russia can't keep this enclave as a military base going into the future. And we've got another clip from Russian Media Monitor. Pundit stuns the host by admitting Russia's expansionist goals go beyond Ukraine. It's only a minute. This is a pretty weird interaction. But let me read for you what they accidentally said on Kremlin state TV. In reality, it's true that if Russia succeeds in coming out of this confrontation as a victor, the fear of the West is that any other country will start more actively proclaiming their rights and telling the United States and NATO to get lost, because they will see that it's possible. The West truly fears this. This gentleman is now going to start speaking. We keep talking about Ukraine, but in reality, no one truly cares about Ukraine. They have the following goal. Russia is embarked on a certain expansionist course. This is a fact. And not only in Ukraine, by the way. NATO countries, European countries want to somehow halt this expansionist course. They don't have a concept how to accomplish that. They can't do it. So the moderator is now going to jump in because this guy has gone rogue. And he states, it's not an expansion, but we're defending national interests and therefore defending our own security. We should really take a break. Let's continue after a short break. And they immediately cut the program and go to commercial. But this guy, who talks, looks, and acts like Dr. Strangelove from the Stanley Kubrick film, admits the truth that, of course, Russia is trying to get their empire back. They already control part of Moldova, they control 20% of Ukraine, all of Belarus, 20% of Georgia. These wars will never end unless Russia is stopped today. They're going for the Baltics, they're going for parts of Poland, they're threatening Armenia, Finland, Kazakhstan. So how many more arguments do you need? Donald Tusk urges U.S. Speaker to approve Ukraine aid after a deadly Odessa strike. So bravo to the Prime Minister of Poland, you are not out of line. I wish more international leaders would start tweeting at Speaker Johnson and let him know. The world is watching, and Speaker Johnson is failing democracy around the world. So I try not to do this, but I'm going to share a clip of Donald Trump speaking, and this is pretty stupid.
They pay us back. Loan them the money. Give it to them as a loan. Let them be a little bit like they have to be a little nice. Loan them the money. Don't just hand them a check for $60 billion. I tell you, Zelensky is one of the greatest salesmen in history. Every time he comes to the country, he walks away with $50 or $60 billion. I've never been able to do that. He's a better salesman. It's a much better salesman.
This is incredibly stupid and offensive. But Donald Trump knows what he's saying and knows what he's doing. Trying to stop or kill military aid for Ukraine, he's now pushing this narrative that it should be a $60 billion loan. Where do I begin? First, let's start with it being a loan. The pre-war GDP of Ukraine was only $200 billion. I'm sorry to the people of Ukraine, you know this, but you've never been a wealthy country because you've suffered under Russian dominion with their corruption schemes. You've never been fully able to utilize your natural resources and your amazing people. If Ukraine can get into the European Union, if they can finally get security for their people by joining NATO, I do believe that Ukraine has a prosperous economic future. But loaning $60 billion to a country when their country is being destroyed, and it's already going to cost trillions of dollars to rebuild everything that Russia has destroyed. That's lunacy number one. Number two is nobody is writing Ukraine a check. Ukraine is not being given $60 billion. This money is being spent here in the United States. What we do is we give Ukraine old weapons, weapons that are almost to the end of their service life, weapons we built in the 80s and 90s, weapons that are not worth $60 billion. What we're doing in the United States is we're giving old stuff, and then buying brand new stuff for what it costs in 2024. This $60 billion is going to US defense contractors. It creates jobs. It creates economic activity. It creates tax revenue for all of these states that produce Javelin anti-tank missiles, or Bradley infantry fighting vehicles, or Oshkosh trucks. Trump's actually not stupid. He knows this. But he's lying to his supporters, trying to manipulate them to help Russia. MAGA Republicans have already blocked a simple up or down vote for 6 months. The election's in 8, and Trump and MAGA Speaker Johnson think that they can do this. They can waste more time, more bureaucratic hurdles, procedural tricks. It's just evil. Ukrainians are dying. Donald Trump and Speaker Johnson knows this, and it's by design. And if you want to argue with me, Viktor Orban already gave away the game. Hungary's Orban claims Trump said he won't give a penny to Ukraine. Viktor Orban 2 weeks ago went to Mar-a-Lago to meet with Donald Trump, and Donald Trump told Orban, "I don't support Ukraine. I'm never going to help Ukraine." Trump is doing everything he can to actively hurt Ukraine. And it's just really sad for America. Let's get to the good news. The Czech plan to get Ukraine massive artillery ammo is a success, but delivery will take a couple months. And this 800,000 shells that were found by the Czech Republic was all paid for with European taxpayer money. The United States didn't kick in a dime to help. Meanwhile, the Kremlin is gaining in multiple sectors. Thank you to the President of the Czech Republic. I don't know where these shells are coming from. Probably Southeast Asia or South America, but they will eventually reach Ukraine by this summer. Hopefully in time for Russia's summer offensive. It's currently mud season, but the fighting will pick up once we get to June. This is pretty cool. Romania announced that they're starting construction on the largest NATO base in Europe. This NATO base will be bigger than Ramstein in Germany. This military base will house up to 10,000 NATO soldiers. I wonder why Romania wants to have a massive NATO base in their country. Is there anything Russia is doing that would make Romania feel like they need a larger NATO presence? Final feel-good clip I want to share is about wounded Ukrainian defenders recovering in an art therapy class in Lviv. This is under the guidance of the artists of the Montclair Project. I just want to share some of the work they've been doing. That's all for this update video. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. If you found this video informative, give me a thumbs up. Best way to support the channel. Comments and questions, let me know down below. I love hearing from you guys. Till the next video, keep defending the truth, keep defending democracy.